Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Allison and this is episode 5 of my knitting podcast. Feels like it's been forever since I've actually sat down and filmed a regular podcast episode. I can't believe it's still January, honestly. Today's the 31st, so finally we're going to be entering February tomorrow, but this month has simultaneously been the longest and shortest month maybe ever. It's just been very busy. I've had a lot going on and haven't really had the opportunity to sit down and dedicate time to filming a video. So I'm very excited to be here and be back and talk about some of the knits I've been working on this month. To start off, I have to apologize again if the sound on this video is less than stellar. I received these little wireless microphones for Christmas to help with my video making, and I've just had so much trouble getting them to pair with my phone. I realized that they were using a lightning attachment instead of a USB-C, so I got adapters for that, but for some reason it seems like the microphone receiver is still not working in my phone, and so the mic won't pair with it. So please bear with me while I try and get this microphone situation sorted out. I really am sorry if you can hear cars or trucks outside. I will do my best to fix what I can in post. But for now, we're microphoneless, and hopefully by the next time I film a video, I will have figured out this situation or purchased new microphones. It's definitely a high priority for me to get that done. Before I jump into my finished objects and what I've been working on lately, I will just introduce you to what I'm currently wearing. This is my Harlow sweater V-neck by Kadri. I knitted this up in Palette from Knit Picks. I held 2 strands together because it's a fingering weight. And this is the color Douglas Fir, and I think it's just absolutely gorgeous. I knitted this up intentionally on larger needles and a size larger than what was recommended for my bust measurement because I really wanted a super oversized sweatshirt that I could just wear while lounging around the house. I wear it out quite often as well. It's just really cozy, nice for those days where you don't feel like wearing tight clothing. It just feels kind of like you're living in a tent, and it's exactly what I wanted. Probably one of my most worn knits to date so far. I don't typically tend to gravitate toward V-necks, but for this sweater I really wanted the V-neck shape, and I do really love it. I'll often wear it with just a tank top underneath because it is quite a low V, so sometimes it goes a little too far down. But yeah, I really love this sweater. I'm obsessed with this color. I want to make more in this exact color, whether that be sweaters or just accessories. It's probably my favorite color I've ever knitted with. I have one finished object today, and it's a gift knit that I did not finish in time for Christmas. I actually only started it after Christmas because I had just so much going on in December. And this is a hat that I've mentioned a couple times on the podcast now. Basically, my sister had asked me to recreate a hat that she saw in a store, and I decided, yeah, of course, I will take that on. So using the weekend hat pattern by PetiteKnit and a bunch of different colors of palette from Knit Picks, I created this hat for her. So if you are the recipient of this hat, please look away. I will bring it to you this weekend, I promise. But this is the hat in question. So like I said, the pattern I used is the weekend hat by PetiteKnit, and the yarn is palette from Knit Picks, which I just held double for all of these colors. And yeah, this is the finished product. I actually had quite a good time knitting this up. I think having the stripes of different colors is really potato chippy in that you finish 1 or 2 rows and then you're just excited to switch to a new color. So it really motivates you to keep going. I made the same modifications on this that I have for all of the other weekend hats I've knitted, and that is just to omit the double knitting fold lines on the brim. But apart from that, I knitted it pretty much to pattern. My sister actually requested that I make the crown a little bit taller than I did on mine. So all I did was add maybe 5 or 6 extra rows to the height before starting the decreases. And I think it gives a good height. This is unblocked. I wanted to make sure I had woven all the ends in before blocking it, and I'm still not done weaving in the ends because, as you can imagine, there are tons. So I'll show you what it looks like on the seam side. It definitely shows up quite a bit on camera, actually. So essentially, because I'm switching colors almost every row, it's like knitting in tarja. So I have to make sure that I've pulled all of the loose ends really, really tight and woven them in tightly so that nothing gapes here. Like you can tell in areas where there are quite a few color changes, it is quite gapey. So I do want to make sure that I do a really thorough job at weaving in those ends and tightening that up so that it doesn't come undone and so that it doesn't look too bad. I've actually already woven in the ends that are going to be visible on the brim because this is going to be showing, so I really wanted it to be woven in nicely. But the ones on the inside, I have yet to weave in, so I'll show you what that looks like. I was joking to my husband that it kind of looks like a horse's mane. And of course, if it weren't for the fact that there are gaps, I would probably just leave them like this or maybe braid them down just because they aren't going to be seen there on the inside of the hat. But again, because I want to tighten up that area where the beginning of round marker was, I will have to go through and tighten all of these. I also had considered carrying the yarn through like I would do with like a traditional striped sweater, but I thought that that might get a little messy, a little bulky. I did do it with a couple colors. You can see here with this sort of yellowy beige color, I did carry that up. But for the most part, I did just cut the yarns. I used 5 different colors for this, so as you can imagine, the yarn management was kind of crazy. I had holding them double as well, so at any given moment I had 10 balls of yarn just sitting next to me on my couch ready to be swapped in and out. So definitely not the most convenient project. This was definitely an at-home on the couch stationary project, but I am happy with how it turned out. I think it was definitely worth it. And I hope my sister enjoys it. I'd had every intention to map this out on Stitch Fiddle and chart all of the colors so that they would exactly match the hat from the store. I quickly abandoned that idea because one, I wasn't too sure of how many rows I was going to need to do before folding over this brim. So I wasn't sure how many rows to include in this chart. And I was finding it a little bit difficult just to interpret which row should have which color because my colors are a little bit different from the ones in the hat included. When I had purchased the yarn, I originally purchased 6 different colors and I only ended up using 5, and that is because the photo of the hat from the store has a gray yarn in it, like a bit of a darker gray, and I could not find a perfect match for that in palette. So the color of gray that I ended up ordering was quite a bit lighter, and ultimately I didn't love how it looked with the rest of the color palette. So I do actually have 2 rows of that gray in here hidden in the brim, but I just thought that the contrast was a little bit too high because of how light this gray is. So I didn't think it was worth going back and removing those 2 rows because they are super hidden within the brim here. You can see them a little bit if you fold the brim down. But ultimately, I think the 5 colors turned out pretty good, and all things considered, pretty similar to the store hat. So I'm happy with this. I, again, hope my sister loves it. It's definitely an itchier yarn than I would typically knit a gift hat out of because, again, I'm not too sure of her wool tolerance. The reason I decided to go with palette was A, because of the wide color range, and B, I thought that the more rusticy looking yarn would be a better match if I was trying to emulate the vibe of the hat she saw in stores. I think if I used something that was like superwash and really smooth and shiny, it wouldn't have the same rustic looking effect to it, the same sort of halo on it. It's not a huge halo, but there's definitely some little bits. So I hope she's able to wear it. If not, she can just display it somewhere. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. By the end, I was definitely happy to be finished with it because, like I said, all the yarn management. But I was also silly and I purchased 2 balls of each of these colors when in reality I could have just purchased one and pulled from the outside and the inside to hold it double, because now I have enough yarn left to make like 8 more of these if I wanted to. So I do suspect that there will be some color work in my future where I can hopefully use a few of these colors and get them out of my stash. I know my husband has expressed interest in an orange winter hat, so I might just use up the leftover orange to make something for him. But yeah, that is my custom stripy weekend hat. As far as my whips go, I have one that has made a very, very brief appearance on the podcast and another that I've not yet shared. So before I jump into the whips that I have here, I will address my Monday sweater, which in my last podcast, I was having sort of an internal debate about the color and if it was flattering on my skin tone. I have not worked on it since. I was a little discouraged, so I had put it away, and then I just got swept up doing other projects. I really wanted to make sure that this hat was finished because it was meant to be a Christmas gift, and now we're heading into February. Not that my sister won't be able to wear this hat for the next like 3 months because Canadian winters, but I did want to make sure that that was the priority. For now, my Monday sweater is still on ice. I hope to have it finished soon. I have like a sleeve and a half left. It's really not much, and I can probably be finished it within the next week if I monogamously knit on it. So I will try and get some rows on that this weekend and hopefully get the momentum back and finish that, because the yarn is so soft and cozy and I know I'm going to enjoy wearing it regardless of whether I like the color on me or not. So I'm going to go ahead and hopefully have that finished by the end of February. That's the goal. For now, I have, like I mentioned, a whip that I've shown before and a brand new whip that I have mentioned on the podcast but have not started when I talked about it. So the first whip that I have shared very, very briefly is the Burgos vest by Rosa Pomar. Can you tell I'm out of frame just trying to untangle it? And this is what I have so far. So all this is really missing now is the button band and the armholes. I bound off the body 2 days ago now. Just did a 2x2 Italian bind off for this. I didn't do too much ribbing. I think the pattern only suggested 3 rows of ribbing, but I wanted a little bit more, so I added a bit of length to that. But the body is complete. Now, I think I'm going to put this one aside for a little bit before I pick up for the finishing details, because I am, once again, not too sure how I'm feeling about this whip at the moment. I definitely wish that for the fit I was going for, I had made this one size larger. I think this might be a little too tight for what I was going for. Of course, adding the button band and the armhole ribbing will add width to this. I definitely think it'll still look better than I'm imagining right now when I try it on in its unblocked and unfinished state. But I was a little bit discouraged by that because it just doesn't have the shape that I was hoping for. That's fine. I mean, knitting is about experimenting, and I'm gonna still finish this and hopefully it comes out better than I expect. I think this will be a great item to wear during the holidays, which I know is light years away at this point, but I think this color will be perfect just over a white turtleneck. I think it would look really, really cute at Christmas time. And I think it'll look cute in other months as well. I just got to figure out how I'm going to style it. So I knitted this up in one strand of Purl Soho Good Wool and one strand of Hobbii Alpaca Blaze. The Good Wool is 100% wool. The Alpaca Blaze, I decided to pair with it because it was sitting in my stash from years ago and I wanted to use up what I had in my stash. So in order to get gauge, I figured, why not throw the Alpaca Blaze in here with the Good Wool? Only after starting this did I realize that the Alpaca Blaze actually has a higher acrylic content than I had thought. I don't have the ball band with me right now, but I believe it's 30% acrylic. And it definitely doesn't feel like the softest, nicest alpaca yarn that I've ever felt. So that is a little bit of a bummer, but again, in the interest of busting my stash and using what I have and not buying anything extra this year, I think it does the job. And you know, if it's not the softest, that's okay, because this is always going to be something that I'm wearing a shirt underneath. So I don't think you can tell when you look at it that it's got acrylic content in it. I'm really, of course, trying to move away from using like synthetic acrylic yarns, but you know, it is what it is. I've used it. It's fine. And yeah, so overall, I love the color of this. It's definitely one of those colors that I have been gravitating toward recently. And yeah, I will definitely update. Like I said, this one might take a back burner, especially to my Monday sweater that does have to get done. But the more I'm looking at it now, even on camera and stuff, the more I'm excited to have this done and thinking, you know, we can make this work. So I will, of course, update once I have more to share. My last active whip for now is a new one to the podcast. Like I said, I did mention that I was going to knit this, but I did not have a swatch yet. I hadn't started it yet. So this is going to be making its podcast debut. And this is the Stornoway sweater by Coco Amore Knits. Not really looking like too much now because I have not even connected yet under the arms, but I'm already loving how this is coming out. This green is very similar to what I'm wearing now, actually, just a little lighter, and it matches my nails. So can you tell I like green? I casted this on as part of the Stornoway Sweater Squad Cal that is happening right now until March 15th. It's being hosted by Casey from Young Folk Knits and Rachel and Jessica from Those Twins Who Knit. Like I've mentioned before, they're both channels that I enjoy watching and following on Instagram. So I thought I would jump at the opportunity of joining a knit along, and it's been fun seeing how many other people are knitting the same sweater at the same time and what colors they're choosing. There are some people even doing a solid color, but the stripes are still there because of the textures. So a lot of really interesting interpretations of this pattern, which is really fun to see. I clearly am not too far in this. I believe I casted it on about 2 weeks ago now. And the entire front part here was done on a road trip to Boston, to and from Boston. So I was happy that I was able to get a lot of car knitting done on this, but because I've been focusing on these other projects, I haven't really had time to sit down and focus on this. So this is going to be probably what I would spend most of the next week working on, just because I'm having so much fun with it. It's really engaging. The repeat is, you know, it's not super short. It goes from here to here, but it is easy enough to memorize to the point now where, with the exception of armhole increase shaping, I really don't need to check the pattern at all. because I'm in this rhythm now of, you know, knowing how many rows I need to do in each section before I move on. I think that the colors really complement each other well. So this is Knit Picks Wool of the Andes worsted. In the gray is Dove Heather and the green is Noble Heather. And these are stash yarns that I'm using. I actually frogged, or haven't yet frogged, but will be frogging a whip that I've had on ice for about a year in order to get back the Dove Heather. And then the Noble was just in my stash as well, so I thought it was meant to be. I opted to size up one size from my recommended size. Again, very similar to this sweater, I wanted this to be oversized and cozy. So it's already looking quite wide on me, and this is before blocking as well. Definitely one of those projects that is going to transform a lot with blocking, considering how these stockinette sections of contrast color sort of fold in when it's not blocked. And of course, when it is blocked, you'll be able to see the stripes really, really nicely. I did have a few issues, or not issues, but difficulties when I started this pattern. So one of them being the increases on the back. So like a typical drop shoulder sweater, this is knit by casting on the back panel, doing some increases, and then later picking up at the shoulders to knit the front. So when I was doing the back increases, you essentially have this gray yarn that is carried and it stays on the edge the entire time. So the first few stitches are in the main color, and then the rest of the row is done in the contrast color. But when it gets time to increase, I was having some issue because essentially these are joined by intarsia, and doing those increases was a little bit confusing, a little bit messy. I am not somebody who's done much intarsia knitting before, so it was definitely new for me. And overall on this side, I think it looks okay. It's the other side that I'm kind of disappointed with, and at this point I'm not going to go back and fix it because it's at the back. It'll be covered by my hair most of the time, but you can see that this area here doesn't look so clean. There's some gaping that I assume I can tighten up by weaving in these ends eventually, but there's also just this little bit of gray that shows through the green, and it happens up here as well. I don't know what I could have done to avoid this. I probably could have done more research into what to do, but I was so excited to just get moving on this that I thought it would be fine. Again, not the end of the world, and it's only really an issue in this section here where you have these edge stitches. When it comes time to increase, you know, just on the contrast color where there is no border, it's not an issue, of course. But yeah, just something to note if you are thinking of knitting this pattern, or maybe I'm just stupid and I missed some kind of direction on how to make that look neat. But that was definitely a little bit frustrating. Another thing is that typically when I am knitting a striped garment, I will carry my contrast color through the whole way so that I don't have to cut and then weave in those ends every single time. However, with this sweater, the contrast color sections are made up of an odd number of rows. So essentially you are starting on one side and you're ending on the other side. So by the time you get around to knitting another contrast section and you want to start here, your yarn ball is on the other end. So I suppose I could have avoided that by just attaching two different balls, but because I took this on the road, I didn't necessarily want too many live skeins just hanging off of this project. So I've opted to cut every section, and I'm gonna deal with it later. And there is quite a bit of cutting and reattaching. Like, I haven't even joined yet for the body, and I already have this many ends. So Something to note if you are knitting this pattern, that there is a lot of cutting and reattaching yarn because of those stripes. But again, not something I think is a deal breaker for myself, at least. I like the pattern enough to suffer through having to weave in all those ends. So I really don't mind. I think it's just that with this, it's feeling like a lot of ends that I'm gonna have to take on right now, but it'll be worth it, right? For the finished product. And I'll be honest, sometimes on my own sweaters, I don't weave in all the ends. I weave in the ones that might poke out, but sometimes there are still a few ends just hanging around inside my sweaters. So yeah, that is pretty much all I have to say for now on the Stornoway sweater. I am hoping to have this done within the deadline of the cal. I know that's not super important, but I think it's good to have sort of a goal date for when I want to have a project done, because that will then give me the motivation to actually work on it. So very happy with how this is knitting up so far. I love the yarn. I've used it several times on other projects and have loved it every time. So this is definitely going to be a fun one to knit up and get off the needles. When it comes to plans and acquisitions, I have been very good so far. I mean, it's only been 1 month in the year, but I've been very good with my yarn buying. Like I mentioned in my winter plans video or my 2025 plans video, I did buy some Pure Gint at the start of the year, but I have a plan for it. It's fine, we're gonna move on. But the rest of the year I have been pretty good. I'm not on a no yarn ban. I just want to make sure that I'm really thinking through my yarn purchases and of course prioritizing what I do have in stash, which is quite a bit. So that said, I mentioned earlier that I traveled last weekend to Boston. My husband and I just went for 2 nights because we were going for a show. But of course, when I'm traveling, I want to always scope out where the yarn stores are. So in the past, when we've traveled, we do a lot of traveling around Europe. My brother-in-law lives there, so we go quite often to visit family. But there's always the issue of, will I have room in my suitcase? Will I be able to fit all this stuff and have my bag be underweight for the plane? And oftentimes I have already overpacked, plus I've done some shopping for clothes, so it's really snug in there and there's not always room to bring a sweater quantity or even an accessory quantity of yarn home. This time we drove to Boston because it's only about a 5-hour drive south of Montreal, so I had the space in my husband's huge Outback, so I wanted to check out some yarn stores. There were 2 on my radar going into the trip. There was the Boston Fiber Company as well as Gather Here, which is located in Cambridge. Unfortunately, we didn't make it to Boston Fiber Company just because of the schedule. I believe the day that we were there that it was open, they were only open for 5 hours and we had other plans, so we weren't able to make it out, which was really sad, but I'm sure it won't be my last trip to Boston. But on the way in on Saturday, we did actually go to Cambridge and stopped at Gather Here. So I didn't take too many photos, but I can include what I have. This was a super cute yarn store, actually quite large, and not just yarn either. So they had tons of fabrics, different crafting supplies, quite a nice yarn section, but definitely not exclusively knitting. And I went in with the intention of getting some yarn to make some matching penny gloves and a hood. I would have needed quite a lot of yarn because both of those patterns have different gauges, so I wanted to maybe pick up a sport weight with a mohair and then hold the sport weight double with the mohair for the hood. But unfortunately, in the colors I was really enjoying, there were just not enough. And there was also not a huge selection of mohair or suri alpaca, so I quickly scrapped that idea and decided, you know what, I really want the penny gloves. I'm gonna just look for a penny glove quantity of yarn while we're here, and then maybe down the line I can make a matching hood or make a completely different matching set at some point. So my husband came up to me at one point in the store and handed me this yarn here. And immediately I fell in love with it. And I was like, yes, I need this. So unfortunately, there were only these 2 skeins left. So again, I only have enough for the sweater, or the gloves, and can't make the hood with this, but I'm okay with that. Clearly, I'm in my burgundy loving sort of red purple phase right now. The colors I was going in kind of hoping to get were either like a deep, like warm dark red or a warmer green. Again, 2 colors I love. But I fell in love with this and I couldn't leave without it. And I thought it was kind of cute that this was one that my husband found and brought to me. So this is the Road to China Light Silken Jewels yarn from the Fiber Co., who are an American company. So that was cool that I went to the United States and was able to get some American yarn. I believe they're based out of Maine, but it's not too far from Boston, so I'll take it. This is a sport weight yarn, and the fiber content is 65% alpaca, 15% silk, 10% camel, and 10% cashmere. And when I tell you it's so soft, I'm not exaggerating. Like, I know in the past I've said this is the softest yarn I've ever felt, but this might be the softest yarn I've ever felt. I have never knitted with camel or with cashmere, so it feels kind of luxurious to have. I think one day I would love to knit myself a pair of gloves or mittens out of 100% cashmere. Right now, not necessarily in the budget and not necessarily something I need. So this, I think, is a great substitute for the time being. I believe each of these skeins was about 25 USD, which is definitely not 25 CAD, I'll tell you that much. So I ended up spending about $80 Canadian on these 2 skeins. So overall, I think it was probably a good thing that I couldn't find more to fulfill my vision that I had, because I would have ended up spending probably close to $200 on yarn, which, you know what, it's vacation, it's fine. I would have let myself do it, but it's definitely nice to have, you know, walked away with a more budget conscious quantity of yarn. And yeah, I'm really excited about these. I think these will probably be my next cast on, just because, like I said, we're coming into February and it's been absolutely freezing here. And I would love to have a pair of fingerless gloves so that I can use my phone when I'm outside or do anything that I need my hands with and not have my gloves on. But alongside this, another high priority cast on for me in the next coming weeks will be the Moby Sweater Man for my husband that I have the yarn and stash for, and I mentioned in my winter plans. It's not something that I'm gonna have finished by this winter, I can almost guarantee it, but I have discussed it with him. He's totally okay to wait. This is the kind of thing that I want to make sure turns out nice, because it'll only be the second sweater I've ever knitted for him. But yes, my immediate plans are going to include both of these projects. So very, very excited. Happy I got to share this yarn. It's such a gorgeous color. And although it is close to the burgundies I've been knitting with lately, it's definitely leans more cool on the purple side versus something like this. So it will be a nice little different addition to my wardrobe. And I think this will look really, really nice with my camel colored wool trench coat that I wear on not so freezing winter days. So that is it for my podcast today. I know this was a bit of a quick episode, but the last month has been just crazy. And so I've had spells of knitting a whole bunch in a day, and then I'll jump to the next day and knit basically nothing. So if you watched until this point, thank you so much for sticking with me. If you're not subscribed, I would love to have you, and I will see you next time.